Tell us a little bit about what you saw and being able to relay that message to Cora when you watched Kimbrel pitch and kind of help out so he wasn't tipping his pitches.
So tipping pitches, we hear about it all the time.
People at home understand what tipping pitches is all about.
It's amazing.
And that's remarkable.
Hello, dear listener. As you might have gleaned from the title and the description of this episode, Alex is still not back. Scheduling around the travel was just a little bit more challenging than we anticipated, so wanted to do a little housekeeping before we start this episode here, which is an unlocked episode from our Patreon with friend of the show, Hannah Kaiser, doing 3 Up, 3 Down, an old segment that you might recognize here on the main feed, and one that we do every other week over on the Patreon feed. That's patreon.com/tippingpitches. So if you like what you are about to hear, you can go find our entire back catalog of the last, I guess, half year of doing Patreon episodes every other week. A lot of really great stuff in there that we're, I guess, proud of. Alex will be back next week. And on that episode, we will catch up on everything that he missed in the time that he was away, traipsing around Europe. I'm really looking forward to talking about some of these stories over the past couple weeks. It'd be super helpful if you all have topics that you want to hear us cover. If you could send them over to tippingpitchespod@gmail.com. If you want to call our voicemail, it's 785-422-5881. DM us on Twitter, tipping_pitches. Sorry, DM us on X, the Everything app. Yeah, questions, topics, concerns, thoughts heading into the final stretch of the 2024 Major League Baseball regular season. We're taking any and all suggestions, because I know that Alex was not following baseball that closely while he was on vacation. Those are the first two things. The final thing is, over these last couple weeks, I know many of you listened and reached out and said very nice things about our betting pod, our fictional betting scandal pod. And if you haven't listened to that and you're listening to that right now, I would suggest, along with listening to this episode with Hannah, which was really fun to record, and thank you to Hannah for filling in, guest co-host on the Patreon feed, the first ever. Along with listening to this episode, go back and check those 2 episodes out. Part 1, where we scripted and sound designed and voice acted and all of that good stuff, a betting scandal of our own design. And part 2, where we talked with friend of the show, Bradford William Davis, about how Major League Baseball might actually handle a scandal like this, what would come of it, whether they're prepared for it, how different scandals over the last decade, half decade, have informed how we think they might handle it. Bradford, incredibly smart, one of the smartest baseball writers and thinkers out there, and a good friend of ours. So that was really great too. That was last week and then the previous week. So if you're behind on tipping pitches, a lot of really great stuff for you, as well as a lot of great stuff coming up when Alex comes back next week. And I hope you enjoy this unlocked Patreon episode from last week. We'll talk to you soon. Hannah Kaiser, hello. We're breaking format today on the Patreon feed. You're the first person who is not me or Alex to ever appear on a bonus episode. How does that make you feel? Is that a lot of pressure? Am I putting too much pressure on you off the jump?
I didn't know that. Wow. No, I'm honored. It's actually, in some ways, this is a compliment to your Patreon subscribers, but it's less pressure because like you gotta actually already have bought into the concept of the pod to be listening to me.
Completely agree. That's why every week when we do the Patreon, we're like, should we just only do this? Should
yes,
we just
right.
only do the ones where like people are really nice?
Yes. Like these people already like what you do. So less pressure in that sense.
You're here to do 3 Up, 3 Down.
Yes.
Which is a segment that we used to do on the public feed, and now we just decided it would be our Patreon every couple weeks because it's a reliable way to talk about baseball and a format that keeps us on the rails somewhat. Yeah. Normally we would start with like Alex would probably be in the middle of doing like a 5-minute Bruce Springsteen impression, and I would just leave all that shit in because it's a Patreon feed, people are already here. But we can just jump right into it if you're ready, if you feel good, unless you want to.
No, I mean, now I feel like I should be doing an impression of someone or something. But
would you like to do an impression of one of the 30 baseball GMs, maybe?
No. Uh, I was going to say, I am. This is like my husband could vouch for this. I am constantly, weirdly, doing an impression of if you can hear an ump. If an ump gets caught on a loud on like a hot mic, I instinctively mimic him. Like this is the kind of shit you find out when you've like lived with someone for like 11 years. Like I would never have known this about myself, except for that there's like another person who's been observing me watch baseball for over a decade. And like, just like under my breath, I'll do this. So like if they catch the like not even the interesting like strikeout calls. I mean, literally, if he's just like, that's a little outside. Like at home on the, I go, that's a little outside. Like, I don't know why.
It's funny to imagine like your long-term partner basically being like a scout who was assigned to you to whether or not the team wants to sign you. That's
exactly right. He would be like, for some reason, so he's mimicking the umps.
Right. My scouting report would be like, for some reason, he just walks around singing just the hook of OMG by Jose Iglesias, but not the rest of the words.
Yesterday, I was at the ballpark. We were just talking about this, and Kenley Jansen, not of the Mets, was wearing an OMG shirt.
I know. I almost put that in my ups this week. I did not.
Really?
So we're not stepping on the ups.
Okay, good.
That was really cool.
And he was walking around, and again, my spouse is the person I'm most talking about baseball. When I got home, I had posted a picture, and he was like, "Why was he wearing an OMG shirt?" And I said, "I don't know." Somebody asked him that, and I walked away before I could hear the answer. Sorry, I have no help. But he was walking around the park going, "Oh my God." So he at least had heard the song before, or he could infer what the lyrics were from the title.
Kenley Jansen, extremely relatable. I did see that apparently like he owns his own record label. And so he admires what Jose Iglesias is doing and how successful it's become, particularly across the league. I think OMG seems to be popular in all clubhouses, not just in the New York Mets clubhouse.
Kenley is truly delightful. Like I find him to be like one of the more incongruously relatable baseball players. Like there's no reason for that man to be relatable to me. He is how tall? Let's Google. He's a Curaçaoian baseball player who's like 6'7", maybe 6'5". And yet I find him easy to talk to and like chill.
He has an incredible vibe. And
yes,
that means a lot for a closer. I feel like closers, really your vibe burns out in 18 months. Like as soon as you start blowing saves, but somehow he has maintained, I mean, various fan bases, particularly the Dodgers, have had their ups and downs with him over the years. But every Dodgers fan that I know just had a lot of love and respect for him. And when he would come into the game, it would be such a thing. Like he was coming into California Love every time. It was such a fun thing at Dodger Stadium. Like I miss those days. Now it's just sort of sad that he has to be walking 4 people in one inning for the Boston Red Sox, who at the moment are incredibly cursed.
Big therapy guy. I don't know if your listeners know that, but
is that right?
Yes, I love a baseball player who goes to therapy. And
there are so few of them. Well, actually, I think there are probably more than we think, but there are so few of them who are willing to talk about it.
Right. I was going to put as one of my downs. So again, not stepping on any toes. Just Edwin Diaz being even slightly diminished. I know. I want him to never be even a little bit diminished. Like that's the thing with Edwin Diaz, and that's true. Right. The thing with this is sort of what you're getting at with all closers. It's like I am only interested if you're perfect. Sorry. Like that's hard. I could never be a closer because that's an impossible way to go through life. But it's true that it's like Edwin Diaz as completely lights out, sure thing, utterly reliable. The only kind of tension is like, will he have a perfect inning? Sort of.
Right.
Love it. Great. Fantastic character in baseball. Even slightly diminished Edwin Diaz, you're like, it's a guy who pitches 1 inning sometimes. Like, I feel bad saying that, but it's true. You know what I mean? It's like, it's closers really the razor thin bar between like the line between being like, this is the most interesting person at the ballpark right now. And like, that's just a guy who doesn't do as much work as the other guys.
To me, it's like Wizard of Oz syndrome. Like as soon as you pull back the curtain and see him blow up a couple times, you're like, well, shit, this is just a guy. You know, this is not the superstar guy who comes in with this music that's so dramatic. And like, although Edwin looked good yesterday, he touched 101 2-3 straight times to close out that game. So I don't know, encouraging sign. Mets fans are like, we got to find a way to get him his sticky stuff back.
I mean, reasonable. All right.
You ready to do it? You want to do some
Let's
3
do
up, 3
it.
down? So we
Let's do
usually
some
start
3
with
up,
the
3 down.
downs so we can get them out
Okay.
of the way first. So since you're the
Okay.
guest, I'll let you do the honors and go first.
Okay, this is good because I'm starting with one that really feels like I knew you were going to start there because it's very holistic. Things that I think are bad this baseball season is this baseball season. It's bad baseball season.
Wow. Great take. I love this. I have been circling a take like this for the last
Really?
basically 2 months on the pod. Yeah, I'm like, what's the story here? What are we doing?
What's the story here?
What is this year?
I have so many ways that I could get into this. Okay. I'll work a little peek behind the scenes. I've been doing some freelancing and I had a story. I was like working on like a long list of pitches. And I thought it was interesting that we're on pace for no 100-win teams for the first time in a decade. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of like, interesting. No super teams. What's like an interesting angle on that? I was like, well, everyone's mediocre. So like expanded postseason field, maybe that's made everybody mediocre. And so it's like working on this pitch that was like, what's more interesting or what's better, like super teams or everyone's kind of hanging around in it till the end. And then I looked and everyone is not hanging around in it till the end. Somehow there are no good teams and not even that many, or there are no great teams and not even that many good teams. I was like, where are the wins? Who's winning? Because we are not on pace for any 100-win team. The Dodgers are on pace for like 97, and that's the best. And yet the playoff races are already decided. That doesn't, those two things seem mutually exclusive. It seems like it's like, if they're not separating out to the extremes, shouldn't they all be close? But they're not somehow. So how's that happening? There is only the wild card, like the divisions, whatever. But the wild card picture, the Boston Red Sox are the closest to the wild card picture in the AL. They are 5.5 games back, and as you said, currently cursed. The only reason they haven't lost like more ground is because the Kansas City Royals are also playing poorly, but they are in the postseason picture. In the AL, no team not currently in the postseason has playoff odds over 8.4%.
That's just god awful. Like that is really bad.
There's just nothing left to be determined. Like, and then it's only the Mets in the NL. The Mets are half a game back, very exciting, and then it just falls off from there. In May, Sam Miller tweeted, "There are only 6 good teams. I've never seen anything like it." And I have thought about that tweet constantly since, because I'm like, you're right. That's the problem. It's like there are no great teams and really only 6 good teams.
I saw that tweet and I was like, 6? Name them.
Right.
It's tough because also like even the teams or the division races that are supposedly supposed to be contentious, there's like varying degrees of dissatisfaction with all of them. You know, the Orioles and the Yankees, in theory, are hammering it out or have been hammering it out for most of this calendar year for the best record in baseball. And yet they both feel incredibly flawed. The Orioles should have been ascendant, and like they're going to win fewer games than last year and have questions just as pressing as they did heading into the postseason last year. Now, granted, there's a small sample size. They got eliminated by a team that was incredibly hot last year. They could go on to win the World Series this year, very likely. Well, not very likely, but as likely gets in this sport. But it's just like, you would like to see the 2 teams that are sort of like, you know, butting heads all season. You'd like to see them humming a little bit more. It seems like which team can fail less, which is not super compelling. And on top of all of that, the White Sox have lost approximately 297 games this year. And still, those wins have not been distributed to other teams to make them appear better. It's like they're just losing. They've lost to all the teams that they would have lost to last year, as well as the teams that are supposed to be bad too. They've just lost to everyone. And so, like for example, the A's are like 18 games under.
Conundrum almost.
It's really bad.
Like, where are the wins going? Who is good? I do SNY occasionally, like TV and stuff, and we always like toss on the Yankees, even though it's primarily Mets. And it feels like every time we talk about the Yankees, we're talking about how bad the Yankees are, and
and how poorly constructed, and how everyone's making the wrong decisions.
It's not looking good. They don't have and we truly they do a segment that's like, how are the vibes or whatever. And frequently we are diagnosing the vibes are better on the Mets than they are on the Yankees. And I'm like, the Yankees are a very good team, and you're right, the vibes are not that good.
The power of love and the power of friendship is powering the New York Mets. Sean Manaea and Luis Severino being the 2 guys you would most want to be around in a baseball clubhouse. That's right.
It's this season is bad. It's a bad baseball season. I would have been interested in, to get back to this sort of like original pitch that I had, which was like, is it more interesting to have super teams or is it more interesting to have close races? That's it. That would have been, if we actually had close races, that would have been an interesting kind of like counterbalance to a decade of super teams. Because we really have had like a decade of super teams, and it's like been 100+ win teams and several seasons with many 100 win teams. And so to kind of have like a break from that would have been an interesting, potentially like analytical point, narrative point, something new for us to consider as baseball fans. But then instead we're just getting like, no one's happy with their team.
Yeah. And one of the things that I was trying to articulate, I think on the Patreon a couple months ago, was that also it feels like no team knows why they're good or bad. Like it feels like GMs are less in control of whether they want to be all in or all out or just like shooting the gap than they ever have.
They all want to be shooting the gap.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, I feel like that's the problem. This is the logical conclusion of 15 years of everyone building their team exactly the same way, which is to say everyone trying to do as much of the Rays shit as their fan base will accept. Like, that's basically what's been happening for the last 15 years, all to lead a bunch of teams to be very similar. Like, they're all just every team is like pretty similar, similarly constructed, similarly managed. And this is not even like an anti-analytics rant. This is not even like a we should all be Ned Yost free thinkers rant. Like this, it's just like every team is just kind of the same, you know? And they're all just like good and bad in the same ways, except for the teams that are just intentionally trying to lose as many games as possible, of which there is always going to be somewhere between 5 and 10, just because.
And yet somehow that's not the White Sox.
No. What's going on there is like,
they're not trying to lose as many games as possible, and yet here we are.
I'm like surprised at what's gone on with the A's, because heading into the season, we were kind of like, wow, this is really, they've cut bait with everybody last year. Maybe not record wise, they weren't as bad as the White Sox, but like run differential, they were just as bad. They were getting smoked every night, and they're like not that bad this year. So I'm almost like, can you even build a bad team for 3 straight years if everyone is just developing players the exact same?
No, right.
And can you build a great team for 10 straight years unless you're going to be like the Dodgers and just spend $270 million every year?
At the draft last year, so 2023, the draft, I wrote something about that was like looking back at like starting with the Sixers and the process and the whole like the history, because it was at the occasion of the draft lottery kind of coming in, like what happened to tanking and all of that. And it's the conclusion was that like someone has to finish last every year, but also only one team can finish last every year. So like tanking kind of had like an expiration date as soon as it started as a strategy, just because it was like, this is really only going to work when like 2 teams are out ahead of everybody else. As soon as like anyone else catches on, you just get stuck like mired in what we have now, which is like teams that aren't quite willing to commit to being the worst team, because they can't kind of guarantee they're going to be the worst team, but then they're also like, but we're not good. It's like, instead of tanking, we've replaced that with just like teams that are like, doesn't look great for us this year, so we're just going to hang out in the kind of like middle back.
Yeah. We've replaced it with like rate limiting teams, like teams that are just like, they've put a ceiling on themselves.
Right.
And they're like, we'll probably get somewhere near that, but we don't know how close to that we'll get.
Yeah.
Like the A's will never, they could have never, with the roster that they had and the investment that they had, finished better than 10 games under 500, right? And that's like, they've gotten closer to that than we expected, but that was always going to be the outcome, right?
Right.
I don't know. It's my first down, I think falls right in line with what you're talking about. My first down is whatever the hell's happening with the Mariners. Like
great call.
I just feel like the facade just got ripped back from that organization very abruptly this season. Like they were finally leading the division, finally felt like, okay, we've been waiting a decade for the Astros to finally fall off. You know, there was all these pieces written after the Astros 2017 and after their 2019 appearances in the postseason, like all these pieces written about how stacked they were and how set they were for years to come. And we finally were getting to the logical conclusion of that. And then just their fates just changed, and the Mariners just went in the tubes, and they just can't hit, and they can't develop a hitter, and they can't even like buy a hitter on the free agent market. In part because, I mean, it's a pitcher's park, number one. Number two, their organization is clearly on the seesaw, like all the way down on the side of pitcher development. They're so good at that. And maybe they haven't put the right resources into hitting development, or they just haven't found the right people or prospects. But then also, like, they don't pay the premium for the hitters who are going to be good no matter what in all ballparks. They pay, like, they try to be like a middle class team, and you're going to get like middle class outcomes on free agents when you do that. Like when you try to pick from the guys who are a little bit on the older side, or the guys whose power comes and goes year to year. Like it's just never going to be as reliable as you're hoping that it will be to fix this organizational problem that you have. And then from the top down, like they've just completely lost the thread this year. Like they fired Scott Service, but they mishandled it royally. And I feel like finally we are getting the answers to, like, is Jerry Dipoto a good GM? I feel like
the answer is no.
No, I feel like the answer is no. But he's just a busy GM. And like at some point, you kind of just like have to have a strategy more than just win today, or like win this individual trade. Like you have to be willing to like lose a couple things, and in some cases like not have the best financial outcome in order to see that didn't work out and hit on a bigger upside player, either in free agency or via trade. Like they just haven't been able to get themselves over the hump, and they just left the door open for the Astros, who, as we see, just continue to make the deal with the devil. Yeah, they're just like they're the Death Star. It just keeps getting rebuilt, like. So it just bums me out. Like that team should be good. We should have a sort of like replacing of the old guard. Like we should be cycling the Astros out. It's time, and yet like the AL West is just sad, and the Mariners just like completely just ran out of gas.
I thought about making one of my downs just the firing of Scout Service, because like pretty unashamedly, Scout Service is like one of my guys. I really enjoy him. I spent somehow, like completely coincidence, the last weekend of the baseball season in both 2022 and 2023 I spent in Seattle. In 2022, it was because they had just made the postseason, and I was like, "Wow, I'm going to go! It's going to be so much fun." And then in 2023, it was because the AL West, very excitingly, contrary to this season, came down to the last weekend. That was like such a good end of the regular season, where it was like all three teams could have made it, or only one could make it, or two could make it, and any two could make it out of the Rangers, Astros, and Mariners. And it ended up that the Astros, Rangers made it, and the Mariners did not. And I like, whether it's because like the city is like a really fun place to go to a baseball game, the ballpark is a really fun place to go to a baseball game. Julio is an incredible superstar to like build around. The pitching is so singular in that it's like all homegrown, all really good, and actual good rotation, and not just like expensive guys who break down midway through the season. Like it's such a I like want them, to your point, like I want them to be a new kind of good team, kind of like, oh, this is fun. And it is really remarkable that they have the most obvious, in some ways, problem that they just keep not throwing money at. Like it's kind of like the same thing as last year, and then the year before. Like you had not enough hitting, and then you had not enough hitting, and so then you were like, what if we got not enough hitting? Like it's like a weird, like it's like I can't believe that's worked out different. Like it's like I'm gonna just check the record. They just missed the postseason, then they just made the postseason, then they just missed the postseason. And I'm kind of like, guys, you like 10% more money into hitting or something. Like, you mean, like not that simple, but like kind of that simple. Like, it's just like it's like, I don't know how being a GM, I know is hard in the details, but that feels like the not details. You're right. It's like if you're good in any way, figure out the fact that, they finished 90-72 and missed the postseason in 2021, 90-72 and just made the postseason in 2022, and then 88-74 and just missed the postseason last year. It's like, just get a little more hitting.
I know, just do the obvious things. Like, just
do the obvious thing.
It's not like people. I don't think Mariners fans. I don't think that people like you and I who appreciate the Mariners as a team and a vibe and a fan base, like, who maybe would consider them like our second or third preferred team.
Yes, yeah.
Like, I don't think anybody is reasonably saying go spend $315 million like the Mets or the Dodgers. I think people are saying like do one of the 7 things that Dave Dombrowski did when he took over the Phillies. Like, just do the obvious thing. Please, just do the obvious thing. And it's clear. Like it's become more and more clear over the last few years that like Stanton is just like, no, I won't do that. He's just doesn't
Yeah.
like the owners just do not want to do that. And I've gone back and forth on Dipoto and GMs like Dipoto, where it's like, do I judge you based on like what I think you're allowed to do? Or do I judge you based on what I think you should be doing? And at the end of the day, like if you're still that GM and you're not willing to like make a stand for signing good hitters, like that's basically the GM that you want to be. It's how I felt about Chaim Bloom in Boston. Like if you took the job knowing you had to trade Mookie Betts, I'm not going to give you a pass for trading Mookie Betts. You still wanted to take the job, you know? And so I have to judge you the same as I would judge anybody who did that, make that move. And it's a bad move no matter what. Like it's a bad move to not sign any of the hitters who you know will hit for power. Like it just
and I haven't like fully worked through this take, so I'm not. We'll see where it winds up. But it's kind of like if you think you're smarter than having to do the obvious thing, you have to actually be smarter than doing the obvious thing. And like
yes,
like I was looking at like Teoscar Hernandez's like just like WRC plus, so like just we're going right to like the brute force of offensive production. And last year when he was at the Mariners was his worst offensive year in like 5 seasons. And so it's kind of like, I don't know where you guys went wrong on that. I don't know if that's just the ballpark. I don't know if that's the coaching or the hitting development or something, or what they were telling him to do, you know, kind of like, but if you didn't go for the obvious, here's a really good hitter, and you tried to get like a little bit offbeat slightly, you know what I mean? Like, so, like, and it didn't work, then you were wrong. You did a bad job at the thing you thought you were doing a good job at. Like you didn't throw like $300 million at who was a $300 million hitter available in 2 seasons ago. I don't know, but like whatever Bryce Harper level player there was, you know what I mean? Like it's like if you didn't do that, but you got Teoscar Hernandez for a season, and then he wasn't good that year, then you're not a good GM because you weren't wily in the way you thought you were.
Right. Well, respectfully to Teoscar Hernandez, who is a great player. Yes. He's like a 5th or 6th hitter in a great lineup. Like he's not.
But
the reason that he looks so good on the Dodgers,
that has to be his best year. Like if you're going to get him instead of someone more obvious, it's got to be because you know that it's going to work. And if it doesn't work, then I'm like, well, then now I'm not convinced that you know what you're doing because you didn't. It's in some ways, it's the like. I'm still kind of working out how I feel about David Stearns as the Mets GM, but like it's
I'm open to this.
Yeah, it's the inverse of David Stearns as the Mets GM signing Severino and Manaea to your point, which is like, oh, you didn't do the obvious thing and get like Yamamoto, but the thing you did work. So you get credit as a GM for that. You saved whatever, they spent so much money already, but like, you didn't.
And they also tried for Yamamoto. Like I think they would have preferred to have him.
But I mean, like that's when it's like they needed to get more pitching. You didn't get the best pitcher available. So you had to settle for something. And if it had backfired, it would have been like, wow, bad GMing. You should have gotten the best pitcher available. But it didn't backfire. So I think, you know what? Good GMing. You saw something that we didn't know and you made it work. And you're like, you wilied your way into, and it's the Jerry Dipoto is in some ways doing the opposite in Seattle, where it's like, stop getting to like 40% good hitter. And then he's 30% good when he's with you. And I'm like, well, then you didn't make him even better than you thought he was going to do.
Yes. Unfortunately, like, I think what the Mariners need is like they need to raise their risk profile. Like they need to sign players, and they need to not be worried about it looking like shit 5 years from now or 4 years from now. Like it's gonna look bad when the Phillies are paying $120 million for, Schwarber, Harper, Castellanos, and Turner, and they're not playing very well. They're not all going to line up, but you know what I mean. Like the same thing for the Mets. Like same thing for any of these teams, same thing for the Dodgers. Like it's going to quote unquote look bad if you're judging yourself based on like wins above replacement divided by how much money you spent on this player. Like, but if you want to be good now, like you kind of have to pay the piper, you know what I mean? Like, and they're not willing to do that for a lot of reasons. I think dispositionally, I think that Jerry Dipoto is not willing to do that because he doesn't want to be wrong, because like his whole thing is like, I can be right with all of these individual trades. Well, it turns out that like, it's nice to be wrong sometimes and really right other times. That makes for good baseball teams, not just being slightly right all of the time. You can't just hit singles all day. You got to hit home runs sometimes. And they don't do that.
And I was just sad that they fired Scott Storch. I mean, this was the most, because I like Scott, the most that I've ever been like, what did he do? He was sort of like,
right.
Like here we are like litigating whether it's even Jerry Dipoto's fault. And I'm like, or if we should just blame the owner. And it's like, all right, well, what did Scott do? Like,
I know. That's classic. Like, just fire him so you don't fire me. Move. Like,
yes, and they've been together for so long.
I
Scott and
know.
Jerry DeVoto, like they
And
came
allegedly, he
ran
found
on
out about
together.
it from a breaking news push notification. I don't know how true that is because I'm not a Mariners reporter, but that's not a good look.
That's not a good look. They've been, I think Scott Service and Jerry DeVoto had worked together for like 15 years.
That's insane. 15 years ago, I was in middle school. Like,
Just to be like, it was his fault. And then that's the end of that.
it's unbelievable. All right. What's your second down?
My second down, this is like related to it up. So I'm going to try to do just I've been watching a lot of baseball with my family. I had a baby. That's context for a lot of this podcast.
Woo!
A baby. He's 8 weeks old. From day 10 of his life to like the 5 weeks old. My husband was at the Olympics in Paris, and that was hard. So I was staying with my family, which is a lot of my family. It was 3 weeks with my parents, and then because I was with my parents and the baby was there, and babies are like a gravitational pull unlike anything you've ever seen, the rest of my siblings all came and stayed. Truly, it's crazy. Do you have nieces, nephews, siblings?
I do.
Like,
I
do you go to like the ends of the earth to see these babies?
Actually, so when I first moved to LA, I was living with my cousin, and they were supposed to have a baby like 2 months later, 3 months later, and they had a baby like 10 days later, like super young. And he was a preemie, like very early. And so they were in the hospital with him all of the time. But then over the next few months, as he like got healthier and came home and whatnot, just like, aunts, uncles came, stayed. Like, it seems like we're having a lot of backyard parties now because there's a baby, like,
yes.
So yes, people do.
People travel for babies. So I was like, I'm going to stay with my parents because I need help taking care of this baby. And then my sister was like, I'm going to come and bring my entire family. And then my brother was like, I'm also going to come and bring my wife. And then my littlest brother still lives with my parents. So we don't need to talk about that. So it's a lot of people. And we watched a lot of Phillies because I'm from Philly and they're all big Phillies fans. And so if I'm not, so one of my ups, we'll get there later, but one of my ups was watching baseball with people who are like all a fan of the same team, which is when you do this professionally, not actually a thing you
super
do
rare
that much.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, wow, you guys are all rooting for the same thing that happened. A down, however, is the explanation to all of their frustrations that they cannot seem to understand is that the other team is trying to. Just weeks of being like, why'd they make it out? And I'm like, because that's what the other team was trying to have happen. It's insane. My parents, I'm really just shilling my dad because I mean him. My dad's capacity to be mad about every single one of the 27 outs the Phillies make every single night, as if this is like not the most predictable part of the sport, is like slightly maddening. He'll be like, I know he's going to make it out. And I'm like, well, that's not even a great prediction, honestly.
Right.
Like,
That's just a good bet, like that's just math.
So yeah, it's the Phillies are good too.
I know they're really good. Yeah,
really good, really, really good. Although they were bad for a stretch while I was there, and over the course of being there, whether it's because I became more of a fan or I just like saw the light. My dad's like constant frustration with them. By the end of my time there, I was like, you know what? They are playing poorly. You got a point. They cannot hit the slow stuff.
Philadelphia sports fans' capacity to catastrophize everything, I actually think is like the ceiling of theirs is higher than Mets fans, frankly. Like they have less to stand on. They have less ground to stand on. Like World Series appearance 2 years ago, NLCS last year, World Series win 2008. Like you guys are fine. Super Bowl win, one of the most legendary Super Bowl wins of all time, 6 years ago. Like it's okay. I know that the lows have been low. And I know that they fail in spectacular ways, much like the Mets do. But like, if you're a Philadelphia sports fan and you're my age, like, are you in the top 5 of outcomes for cities like across America? Yeah, like Boston, and especially Philly, like, LA, like
lately with the Phillies. Like I'm kind of like watching people endlessly complain about like Bryce Harper, Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos. You're like, these are great players. These are fantastic players. They're fun. They are good, and they were in the World Series 2 years ago. So it's like, you're right. It's like this particular moment is a very weird time to complain about Phillies baseball. It's not even like they're good. I don't even know why. How are they piecing it together? It's like, don't complain about Trey Turner. Trey Turner's a very good baseball player. You are lucky to have Trey Turner.
Yeah. Trey Turner hitting 330, like it's not like Trey Turner having a bad Trey Turner year too.
Right.
When I watch baseball with people or when I watch sports or whatever, when I'm with my extended family, everybody always wants to talk about sports with me because they know that this is what I do and that this is where I work and whatnot. And it's nice because it's people trying to meet you where you are and something that they can relate to too. But it's also that tete-a-tete, that little dance that you do with people. And you're how deep do you really want to get in? Do you want to talk about ex-Woba or do you want to talk about I'm mad that he didn't run out to first, where are we at?
Right.
I need some terms, some terms and conditions I need to sign on to,
yes, exactly.
create a new account somewhere. I need that. But for sports talk with my family.
It did actually, though, feel like I was encountering in the wild the strain of thought that I know exists, but is frustrating, which is why aren't hitters good these days? And you're oh, glad you asked. It's because the pitchers are really good. You know what I mean?
Yes.
On an individual level, my dad would be why do you swing at that? And I'll be well, because the movement was incredible. It was 106 miles an hour or whatever. I'm kind of then this is a in the milieu of baseball fandom, there is this huge divide between people who are just baseball's bad now because the hitters are bad, and people who are baseball's bad now because the pitchers are really good. And I agree, that does make it bad. That is a frustrating version of the sport to watch, but it's not because they all just decided to suck all of a sudden.
I completely agree. Or that they suddenly over the last 12 years and because they were spoiled when they were raised, because they got too accepting of being bad, which is an argument that is just sort of floating out there that pitchers are just, they don't have any dignity, or rather hitters don't have any dignity anymore. And so the pitchers just walk all over them. This is another reason that the ump cam is a total tragedy. If the ump cam was actually good and could show you how good the pitch was, then people could actually use that as a data point. But instead it's just a shaky camera that doesn't show you the pitch. And they just are obsessed with it on Fox.
But yes, that is the thing that's now, which is trying to engage with people who are kind of why are the hitters bad? And you're that, why would that be the case? Why would it, human history is an argument against that being the case. Trust me, we did not decide that this is a multi-billion-dollar industry and also technology and training, and everyone's gotten bigger and stronger and more talented, but hitters, they just got worse.
And they were fine with it, and they never did anything about it. Agreed.
Right.
Yeah. Some of the most competitive people on planet Earth are just totally okay with it. Yeah, sure. Okay, my next down is this is something that I've been really on since the off season, and I literally don't want to directly blame the media,
okay,
but this is partially a media framing problem because the whole the Dodgers are $1 billion baseball team argument that I've been seeing going on all season has been driving me so crazy. And other fan bases latch onto it because they're oh, we're this plucky little upstart team. And, we took 2 off the Dodgers, the $1 billion baseball team. And it's because in that span of a week, they signed Yamamoto, Ohtani, and Glasnow, and then Freeman the previous offseason.
Right.
So the contracts that they had signed over the last 2 offseasons was $1.2 billion or something like that in total value. I'm you guys are talking about 2039 as if that's a real year. I don't care about that year. That's not real. I
was having this conversation with someone literally yesterday where I was talking AAV. Why do we not all talk in AAV all the time?
Exactly. It's driving me crazy. They don't even have the biggest payroll in the league. What are we talking about here? And also, it's really rich coming from Padres fans who have just totally shirked payroll. They're just fuck it. We're just going to keep signing people to the point where there's anonymous sources, bad-natured anonymous sources around the league being I don't know how they can afford it. It's you guys are spending a lot of money on players too. Everybody's spending a lot of money on players and it's a good thing. Can we just move on? Can we just stop with the whole $1 billion team? And then the other element of it is that average sports fan who complains about the concept of $1 billion being too much, I'm can you just apply this thought process to literally anything else in life? You're in Elon Musk's replies being thank you, sir. What are we doing? It's driving me in particular so crazy.
Because the money over time element is such a weird, I express my rent in how much it is per month. not
Right.
in like how much I might eventually spend.
Well, I think because that would be really crushing, soul
That would be
crushing.
so depressing. It might also be $1 billion eventually.
Yeah, can you imagine if like you were like, yeah, I think I'll probably live in New York for 5 years. So like my rent is, and then you said like the total amount that you think
Right.
you will pay over the next 5 years. That would be mind blowing.
People would be like, whoa. And you're like, right, but that's not how I earn money. So it's also not how I spend. Like, it's such a, yes,
Yes.
I agree. Sorry for
Yes.
that media framing.
Yeah, I mean, I blame you and all the other mainstream media members.
That's fair.
You did it. Yeah. In terms of culpability, it's Jeff Passan, Ken Rosenthal, and then you.
It's not though, because I don't have a job. That's my last down. I don't have a job in baseball. I mean, I do. I have like various little gigs. I thought about trying to find something like more relatable to your listeners. But my least favorite thing about this baseball season is that I don't have a full-time job, and the postseason is approaching, and I will be very sad if I do not get to cover the postseason because I love covering the postseason. Like truly, I love the postseason so much. And also, the postseason is very difficult. But I think relative to having a newborn baby, it would be less difficult. So someone should hire me because I bet I'd be better at it than ever because my sense of lack of like I could work on very little sleep now. That's a benefit in the postseason.
Like, I'm built different now.
I'm built different now. Yes, truly though. Like I love the World Series. I mean, everyone who like loves baseball loves the World Series, but like it's just so much fun. I really enjoy covering the postseason. It's my favorite thing I ever get to do. And I hope I get to do it this year.
Will you, if there's playoff baseball in New York, well, there will be at the Yankees. Will you, even if you're not like assigned to a specific thing, will you still try to get credentialed and go and just work on stuff?
I will. It's so again, we were talking about this right before we got on the pod. Priorities are tough when you have a baby because you're like, I gotta actually get some work out of this. I can't just be like, you know, what would be fun is to watch a
8 hours at the ballpark.
Game.
Yeah, exactly.
So although daycare, we do have daycare starting in October, which we did on purpose. But not at night. So we'll need to figure something out in that respect. I have stuff that I'm working on, which we'll get to in the three ups. So I would hopefully be at some games. I actually was thinking about it, like easier for me to go to postseason games in Philly because my parents are there and they can watch the baby.
Good point.
And because just in general, Yankee Stadium is one of my least favorite places to cover a postseason game because I live so much further from Yankee Stadium than I would ever stay from the ballpark if I was in town to cover a baseball game.
Yeah.
Like whenever I've covered postseason games at Yankee Stadium, I'm like, oh my God, it's like 2 hours of commuting. I never do that in any other city because you can't get an hour from the ballpark in any other city and still be in the city.
It takes me 90 minutes to get to Citi Field from where I live. People are like, oh, you're in New York, you're going to games all the time. And I'm like, no.
Right.
No, I go, but like, I'm not just going on a whim, you know?
Yes. I always like kind of, whenever I have covered postseasons, I've always hoped that the Yankees would get eliminated early. I'm like, I can't be coming home from like a World Series game where it's going to take me like an hour on the train if all the trains are running normally, but who knows at that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like maybe it's a weekend and it's going to take me 2 hours on the train. And like,
oh man, this just became like Brooklyn resident transit hour, which half of the Patreon listeners will be like, oh my God, so true. And the other half will be like, here they go again.
Yeah. So that's my down. I would like to cover baseball again real time.
My third down is bleak, but kind of related to that. Did you see this story about ESPN will be using generative artificial intelligence to write game recaps for the Premier Lacrosse League and the National Women's Soccer League? They have decided that they will use basically just generative AI and write like incremental recap stories like as the game goes, and that will be how they will cover those leagues. Now, am I going to read game recaps for the National Women's Soccer League? No, probably not. Am I going to read Premier Lacrosse League recaps like in the ESPN app? Me personally, no. But whenever I see something like this, and particularly like on the back of what you just said about like you not having a full-time job to cover the sport, like I just know that they're sinking a ton of money into this. I know that all these places are sinking a ton of money into this, and the payoff will always be to the executives who are involved in this and will never be to the people who actually like lost out on work because of this. Number one. But number two, just like conceptually speaking, this is the most like Russian doll we're removing, like hat on a hat. Like this is a real sport that like has value because real people play it and real people are fans of it. And so why would you remove the real, like, if you think it's worthwhile, shouldn't there be a real person who is creating the coverage and like the genesis point of then the fans get to talk about that and talk about the coverage and share the article and see what happened? Like, that is the job of a real person in a functioning society. You know what I mean? Like, the only reason this has value is because of the community. And now we're like trying to minimize the community and turn it into something that is just like done by computers for efficiency's sake. It's very
strange. It's like, you said this is ESPN that's doing this?
Yes.
You're fucking ESPN. Like, if you don't want to cover sports, why do you exist? Like, it's such a weird, it's like you're automating with all this stuff. It's like you're automating the main thing, which is like the sports coverage. And you're like, it's not like you're automating some ancillary thing to make the main thing like you can spend more time and energy on the main thing. It's like you're automating the main thing. It's like, why do it at all then? Like, it's right. Like, it's kind of like ESPN exists because someone, some point, decided like it'd be cool to cover sports and like have like an interesting, engaging human media element to go with the interesting, engaging on-field element. And then it feels weird to like automate that because you're like, well, why don't you just not do it at all then? In which case, why do any of it? Like, it's such like it truly gets to that like existential level of being like, if you're trying to make it as like efficient and personal and inhuman as possible, like, why are you even doing it? Like, automating like how you file expense reports, great.
Exactly.
You're not an expense reports company. You're a sports media company. But like, automating sports media is such a weird thing for a sports media company to do, because it's like you're automating yourself sort of like out of existence, and just to like, there's no inherent value in game stories about lacrosse. So you don't need to like get there as efficiently as possible.
No.
Like, they're only good if people like them.
The point is that like my brain gets to connect to someone else's brain who saw it with their eyes, and then their eyes told their brain what they saw, and then their brain processed it and gave it to me. This is like how I feel about like movies are going to be, directors are going to be replaced by AI. It's like, okay, then I just won't watch movies.
Right,
like,
exactly. I'm
not coming to movies because of the pixels. I'm not trying to like get to the end of the movie. Yeah, I'm trying to like
enjoy the movie, and not reading a game story just to like import those facts into my brain. I want to like read the story. I want this, like, it's such a weird, everything. It's such a, we could talk about this for too long. Yeah. We should get to the good stuff at some point. But like, also because I have something at 2, so we should get to the good stuff soon.
Oh, we'll be done well before that. Don't worry.
Okay, good.
I do too.
We'll just take like way longer on all the bad stuff. But like,
that's tipping pitches. Woo!
Right. It's like all industry now feels like, why are you trying to make efficient the jobs that people want to do? That's
exactly like
we're trying to get rid of those.
We've always been about like output over process, right? Like as a country and culture and species and stuff. But like we still used to sometimes appreciate the process in certain things, and art and sports were one of them, right? Like sports is process. You watch the game. You don't just like sim to the end. That's not fun,
right?
And this is simming to the end. Like we don't need it.
It's when now we're like going too many like brain panels deep, but it's like when shitty people on Twitter who hate journalists for some reason like getting the replies, it's like they're and like are like, congrats on all of you losing your job. We love it. Like the like baked in assumption is that like having a job is like a antagonistic competitive thing where you don't want people to like their life, which is such a weird way to like why is that? Like, why, even if it's possible to automate out these jobs, like, why do you hate the people that you being the person who's making that decision at ESPN? Why are you executive who works in sports media, like making it your life's mission to like have fewer, not even your life's mission, even if you're doing it begrudgingly or whatever. Like, but it's just kind of like, I don't understand why it's like, you can see that it would be possible to cut those jobs and then just not cut those jobs, because like, what's life about if not like fulfilling your passion? Like, it's such like a weird, like, I'm always like, why are we trying to have as few good jobs as possible?
Yes.
Just so we can like hate the people who have those jobs more or something. It's like a weird, like,
completely
why
agree.
not why don't we all, like, I want everyone, this is like now I'm going to get like too sentimental, maybe it's because I'm like a new parent, but like truly, I think one of the things that has changed the most about me as a person as I've like gotten older is that impulse has been completely drained out of me. That impulse that is like not wanting other people to have good jobs that they love and are like good fits for. I'm like, now in my mid 30s, there's nothing I love more than finding out that someone has like a good, well-paying job that they enjoy and treats them well, and that they are like have the right aptitude for. I'm like, fantastic, love that for you. Like, why would I as a human not want any other human, ones I do know and don't know, to feel that way? And I don't understand why like anything in our society and industry, especially, has like taken us in that direction. Like, who is pushing us in the direction where fewer people get to have fulfilling, well-paying, sustainable jobs?
I mean, like the people who are hired, they're hired like exclusively to try to help a stock price so that like the executives can then sell the stock. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm just wondering, like, in media, but in all things really, I'm wondering when someone's going to like take a stand. Like,
right. That's what I mean.
For
and
anything?
just sort of be like the humane way to go through the world as like, is to be like, everyone should have a good job that allows them to have rent and a family and food.
Yeah.
That's what I would want as a boss, is for that to be the case.
It would be nice if someone was like, this is an option. No, not like this is an option and it's pre-decided because it is the best for the finances, or the best for quote unquote efficiency. Like, I don't know. Extremely well said. I completely relate to what you were saying. And perhaps in the interest of not pulling us all the way down the rabbit hole and losing the thread of the podcast.
Let's talk about something good.
Let's pivot to the goods. Yeah. So why don't you kick us off there too?
Okay. Well, I'll circle back to the one that I talked about first, which is watching a lot of Phillies baseball with my family. But specifically, I want to talk about, did you see the last week tonight segment about John Kruk?
No, I did not.
Oh my God. I'm like, I don't know. This is like the fact that this happened when I was around my family, people who love the Phillies and all watch Last Week Tonight and will enjoy John Oliver, is insane. Like early August, Last Week Tonight. It feels surreal to me that they even noticed the Phillies for some reason, but they did. So they're like, and now something else was a montage just of John Kruk saying very random things, as John Kruk is wont to do.
Yes.
And it was beautiful. I don't know your podcasting capabilities. Can we insert a clip? I don't know.
Oh, of course. Yes.
Okay, great.
And now, this.
And now, the delightfully bizarre musings of Phillies color commentator John Kruk.
I was thinking about this today, now that we have some time.
Yeah.
Like, why aren't we born with hair on our chest as men?
I don't know that.
Why does it wait till like you're, 16, 17, 18, 20, whatever?
Yeah.
And then it starts growing. Like, where are those follicles dormant?
There's not a lot of shows I watch with the kid. We banned them from one.
I'm not even going to ask which one it is.
Well, I can tell you.
All right.
Caillou.
Oh, okay.
All that kid did was complain. We used to do stuff for the ESPN down at Disney, like Animal Kingdom. They put us up. So the first day I open up the shade. There's a dang giraffe looking in my window. I'm like, what the hell is this?
Did you feed it anything?
I did not. I was scared of it. So Kenny Pierce decided, hey, I'd like to get my girlfriend to come up here. But we go down there and pick her up. Her dad comes out with a dang shotgun trying to shoot at us.
Of course he does.
Did I ever tell you about playing the prison team and when I was playing in winter ball? So I asked the catcher, I said, what did he do? He's out, he found his girlfriend cheating. He burned up her car with her and her boyfriend.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. Very uncomfortable at bat.
Fantastic. Please do that. And a special shout out goes to the Phillies play-by-play broadcaster, Tom McCarthy, reacting to John Kruk. Like, John Kruk will say something like, why aren't people born with chest hair? And then Tom McCarthy will be like, I don't know the answer to that. And it's just fantastic. John Kruk is legitimately quite funny.
Yes.
And like not actually bumbling. Like he's really, really quick and like makes jokes quickly. And like, yeah, it's really good.
He's like a perfect example of one of the beautiful things about baseball. It's like that his sense of humor doesn't work anywhere else. Like it doesn't work in hockey. It doesn't work in, not that he couldn't be like a funny guy if he had been a hockey player. Like, I'm sure it'd be the same. But in terms of the actual like delivery of the jokes, the cadence, the pace, the sport lends itself to that. And when people are like, baseball's boring, I'm like, no, baseball's just not like constant crush of dopamine and adrenaline like other sports are, which is fine. Those are the things are good too. But like, it's more relaxed. It's like podcasting versus,
it's like a Patreon episode versus a real episode.
Exactly.
More meandering. So that's been watching baseball with other fans, and then specifically taking in, and this is like, it's like a microcosm of that larger thing, which is like watching the entire game of one team, even when the game's like quote unquote over, such that you have time for John Kruk to like muse on why aren't people born with chest hair? Like that, you lose that when you're so focused on taking in the whole sport because you're professionally obligated that you're like, what, 7-2, switching over to a closer game. And you don't get to hear those music.
Yes, exactly. It's sometimes nice to like actually put one team under the microscope and be like, what is it like to be a fan of this team?
Exactly.
My first up is Ohtani's dog throwing out the first pitch.
Nice.
Which was like one of those things that kind of really like broke containment into the rest of culture. They were like, oh, a dog.
Yeah.
Really exciting. I want to, like, logistically speaking, how is this dog so well trained? I know there's a lot of theories out there about like the dog is actually a robot or like the dog is a paid actor or whatever. It's like not actually his dog. I want to squash those theories. I think it's actually his dog. I just don't understand. Like, as someone who has a dog that is reactive and not very good, like, it's insane that in a stadium of 45,000 people, this dog can just run out there, no leash, grab a ball, run to Ohtani, like not get distracted by anything. It's unbelievable. To me, I know I said this on Twitter, but like to me, this is as impressive as the moon landing. It's like...
Thank you for saying that as a person with a dog, because I have never had dogs at home and then cats. And me watching that, I was just like, well, cats could never. I assume dogs are different. And then just moved on.
No, I'm like, this is unbelievable. Like, we should be putting this in his MVP case. Like, this is part of the whole package to me. It was amazing. It's just great work all around. We should have more shit like that. Let
I
a
do
dog
think it's
throw out
kind of
the first
funny.
pitch.
I think it's kind of, there's like a part of me that's like cynical about the fact, not that the dog is fake, but that Shohei Ohtani himself was sort of like, I don't want anyone to know anything about me ever. I want to be like an enigma. And then people like really latch onto the dog. And he was like, oh, for sure. You guys can know about the dog. Like, if that's all you want to know, like, by all means, eat up this shit. Like there's something sort of cynical about the way in which he was like, you just needed one personality trait from me. And it could be the most basic, most people feel this way type thing. By all means, knock yourself out. Talk about the dog.
Right. Like, you guys, this is going to satiate you guys. Like, there's a dog. And also, like, I have a random Japanese wife that I didn't tell you about, like, who's a professional basketball player. Think
about the facts that we all learned in quick succession about Shohei Ohtani. It was like, 1, he made $700 million over time, but $700 million. 2, he has a wife. 3, he has a dog. 4, he was being swindled by his best friend out of like millions of dollars. And then we were all like, the dog, tell us more about that.
I
and
know.
Shohei Ohtani has been like, feed them endless information about the dog. This is working for me. Like, it's just absolutely hilarious that he's like, you don't need to know about my personal life. You don't need to know about my finances. You don't need to know about the like betrayal I feel from the person closest to me in this country. You just wanted to know more. You just want to see pictures of the dog. I can do that all day.
Extremely relatable, frankly. Extremely relatable. Just talk to me about my dog and nothing else. Great.
Yes.
All right. What's your second up?
My second up, this is me trying to get your listeners to do my homework for me. Again, don't have it. We're tying it all together. I do have a baby. I don't have a job. I'm trying to freelance. So those are the facts that we've established thus far in this podcast.
It's like an opening statement in court. Exactly. Just gonna get ahead of this honor. Like,
job, no, baby, yes. Freelancing takes up a lot of time. Not worth it for the money they pay you, but you have to do it anyway. So I'm working on a story about personalized sliding gear. This is something I like. You know the sliding mitts, everybody enjoys them because we call them oven mitts.
Yes.
And we've been like, people have been making jokes like, how long could the oven mitts possibly get before nobody litigate this for years? And I started to notice the sliding mitts are very fun. And there's seemingly no rules about what the sliding mitts can and can't be. Maybe the length, sure. But Bryce Harper has a legitimately faux fur Philly Fanatic themed sliding mitt. And I can't believe that in the sport, any sport, what even like a thing that happens in sports is uniforms. You all have to dress the same. They all have to dress the same. And then we're letting Bryce Harper have fake green fluff on his hands. Like, it's such a wild departure from, it took like years, I don't know the entire history of this, to get them to be allowed to have like shoes of a different color.
Yes.
And you can put anything on these sliding mitts, seemingly.
I mean, as recently as like 2019, Mike Clevenger like got fined for wearing, I mean, Mike Clevenger can go to hell as far as I'm concerned, but like he got fined for wearing cleats that had 3 colors on them.
Right. And now they're like, you can do anything you want with your sliding mitts. I'm very interested in I'm hoping to write about specifically this, like, it seems like such a modern confluence of trends and businesses and whatever, that like padding and personal safety gear is like experiencing this incredible renaissance of fashion. It's such a weird, like, guys are like padded out the wazoo, but then also they're using that real estate to like break from the uniform. So I'm inviting your listeners to tell me about players they've noticed having interesting pads, batting gloves, sliding mitts, whatever it is, because I want to talk to them about their weird
great idea.
Sliding mitts.
I like that. You're basically just like you're writing like a trend piece for the T magazine, but about baseball players.
Yes,
that's amazing. I'm sure our listeners will be able to help.
Please do.
And I'll pass.
That is one of those things where it's like, if you like, this gets back to like watching one team. Like, I'm like, anyone who watches any team, I'm sure you know about it. Like, does a guy have a weird color sliding mitt? Tell me. I haven't watched your team in a while if they're not the Phillies or the Mets.
Yeah, the Mets have a couple. I mean, Nimmo has like his own batting, or like he has a batting glove company that he is invested in, and I forget what it's called, but it has like the big lightning strike, whatever. Yeah. So like those are very noticeable. But everybody else, I feel like their sliding stuff is
Harrison
pretty normal.
Bader, he's got the pink and purple.
Oh, true. Harrison Bader, you could write a whole story like profiling Harrison Bader and how he dresses. You know, like
I spoke to him yesterday about his pink and purple sliding mitts, and while we were speaking,
and his crop tees.
He was wearing a pink crop tee, and the Mets logo was like terry cloth material. Like, it was it was like a t-shirt, and then like embroidered on it, or whatever that would be called, like embossed on it, was like a terry cloth Mets logo. And I really wanted to find out more, but I was talking about sliding mitts instead.
She's kind of inspirational, honestly. Okay, my second up. Speaking of the Mets, yes. It was inspired by the Mets Picture Day, but really, I just love the fact that they do like Picture Day for professional baseball teams, and they do it in like September. You know,
it's because like, they're waiting for the trade deadline.
Exactly. Well, they're waiting for it to be the full team. Number one, but number two, what ends up happening is that like the team actually like has identified its vibe by then, so like the picture is actually more accurate to how the season went than it would be if it was like Hope Springs Anew, March 29th. We all have a chance. We're all 0-0. Right. We all have a chance to make the playoffs. Like, no, this is an accurate representation of the New York Mets 2024 season. We're like getting photos with the OMG side in it. We're getting photos where like Luis Severino has Sean Manaea in a headlock. Like, we're getting photos of the Chicago White Sox where literally nobody looks like they've ever been happy in their life. Like, this is accurate. This is how it should be. I just think it's so funny because like you think back on playing Little League and having Picture Day, and it's like these are hilarious photos that will make magnets on your parents' refrigerators for decades to come, you know? And decades later, the guys who still get to play baseball still get to have that day. I just think it's nice. I think it's sweet. You don't get Picture Day at your professional job anymore. I feel like we should all have Picture Day at our professional jobs.
We should all have Picture Day. When I worked at Deadspin, we did have Picture Day, actually.
That's nice. Well, the things they take from us.
I know.
Deadspin as a concept, and also Picture Day.
Picture Day was, and it's true, people really liked it. People really got excited for Picture Day. That would be we would love for there to be more jobs that like pay a living sustainable wage, but also Picture Day would be a nice thing that like like corporate bosses could do for us.
Right. Exactly.
All right. So now it's time for my last up.
Yes.
All right. Again, baby, that happened. I really enjoyed talking to baseball players about having a baby and their baby.
Yes.
I went to spring training for a freelance story, So harkening all the way back to March. And at the time I was like cuspy noticeable pregnant. And so every player who I like had any kind of pre-existing relationship would be like, "Hi, what's up with you?" And I'd be like, "I'm happy." And then they would like love being let in on this secret, and tell me just the most wildly intimate shit about their wives that I'm not going to repeat here. Baseball players will really find out you're having a baby and be like, "Do you want to hear about how birth was for my wife?" No, I don't know that she would love you telling that story. But also, it's like they love it. Because truly, like this is a sweet thing that I will say about baseball players, because like so often in the media, I feel like we're just like talking about how they suck. As people, not as baseball players, they're great as baseball players.
Except the hitters.
Except the hitters, right? They aren't trying at all. But they love being dads, and they are not like ironic people by and large. I mean, they're different. It's like a large group of people, but for the most part, they're not like tinged with sarcasm and irony.
Yes.
So they just are like,
Like
I love being
us.
a dad. And you're like, oh, okay. And then they're so happy. A special shout out to Francisco Lindor, who is in the same vein that some people are like wife guys. He's like a daughter guy. You know what I mean? And I know that like, you know this from afar because that's like his whole persona. But then I know this up close because I was so impressed. He like asked me about my pregnancy when I was pregnant. Until the first trimester was rough, like morning sickness and everything. And this man pulled out the top of his head the prescription name of the medicine they give you if your nausea is too bad. And I was like, wow, I like that fact ratcheted up my respect for Francisco Lindor right there. I was like, damn, you actually really paid attention. Presumably your wife's pregnant. She had a tough first trimester, perhaps. She had difficult morning sickness. She had to take some medicine. And you were like, I don't even remember it now. And I have an 8-week-old. That's why I'm not using it, because I can't remember what his name was.
Right, exactly.
And his kid was like 2 at the time.
That's great. I love hearing Francisco Lindor stories. Like, I feel like one Patreon episode per year could just be us trying to talk to everybody who has a Francisco Lindor story, because it just seems like he just is like that all the time. Like all smiles and stuff.
Yesterday, first time back at the ballpark since I had the baby. And to be fair, we didn't have like a long conversation, but like, so he saw me on the field and he was like, "You had the baby." Because again, you could tell. And I was like, wow, you processed that like that. It truly, that is my Francisco Lindor story of the day for you. It's just that, like, that man saw me, remembered that 3 months ago, I haven't been in a ballpark in a long time.
That's what I'm saying. Imagine how many people he sees every day, you know, like that he just like remembered 2 or 3 things about all of those people. Just incredible. Yes. This is why
that's why he should be MVP.
That's exactly right. That trumps the dog factor with Ohtani. It's a wash on the field. But Francisco Lindor being nice to you about the baby trumps Shohei Ohtani just having a dog.
But yeah, just like across the board, have genuinely really enjoyed like getting to talk to guys about their kids, seeing pictures of their kids. Baseball players, they will, some of them pull out their phones, show you pictures of their kids, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, it's kind of crazy how I never see your phone because you don't carry it around when you're doing the job that we mostly watch.
Except for that one guy whose phone fell out of his
pocket. Who was that? Yes.
I forget. I think it was like, I don't know. I don't want to slander anyone. Not that anyone who's listening on the Patreon really cares, but whatever. It's also funny to remember, like, so many of these baseball players are all at like this exact period in their lives, which is like such a transitory period in people's lives, like late 20s, early 30s, like, and they are people outside of the context of like being in their baseball prime. Like they are also like,
I've had so much fun asking players, like, what's your best baby advice? Because it's like, right. It's so, I mean, like we joke about like being quote unquote relatable, but it's like genuinely so relatable.
Yes.
Like Aaron Nola was like, buy backup pump parts if you're pumping. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. That's like a real fact.
Yeah.
That's not
because when it breaks, like, yeah, you're not, that's not something that's going to come overnight.
You have to wash it because of how much people wash all this. He was saying, again, credit to him, good partner. He was like, I felt like my wife, I can't help her with like the breastfeeding and the pumping. And he's like, so I was trying to wash parts. And he's like, and you're washing the parts constantly. It's like, it took me weeks to figure out I should just buy backups. And I was like, What a relatable story from Aaron
Super
Nola.
relatable.
Like
Amazing.
up in the night washing like bottles and like.
It's funny because like honestly, to put up on it, it just makes me think about how the fact that like the baby doesn't give a fuck that you throw 95 with movement.
Yes.
Like the baby does not care. You know what I mean? Like that's pretty funny.
So yeah.
Okay, well, my third and final up is, I guess, probably something that you've talked about this exact thing with. My third and final up is Nick Castellanos and his propensity to torture the Atlanta Braves, which is just so great for me as a Mets fan who grew up outside Philadelphia. Like, there was so little in my life that I could latch onto that would connect me and the other Phillies fans that were all my friends growing up. And one of those things was a hatred of particularly Chipper Jones, honestly, but just really the Atlanta Braves.
Larry.
And then on the football side,
to Mets fans, Larry to Mets fans.
yes. On the football side, like hating the Dallas Cowboys. Like there's so few things that just bond us together. And it seems like every couple months there's like a really important Phillies Braves series. And I'm just like, finally, I can get behind these guys. The Phillies are a fun team. I can relate to all of my friends who are from the Philadelphia area. Like, and Castellanos in particular, it just seems like he just really gets up for that series. He's such an interesting guy. He's such an interesting player. Really just high highs, low lows. But like when he locks in, it really is fun to watch because he is just such a funny but competitive and introspective and like good in ways that are not super popular to be good at anymore. Like hitting, gap to gap. Like he's not very good on defense, but when he's going right, he's going right. He's the example to me of like the risk upside player that like serious teams take a flyer on, or like that serious teams are willing to like pay a premium for, even though it might not look good, dollars and cents at the bottom of the balance sheet when you look at like his actual production. But when it's right, it's right. And when he is single-handedly just beating the Braves, it's exhilarating. And like, that's what we're here for, right? Like we're here for a player who just tortures another team's fan base. And I think that Castellanos has been that against the Braves the last couple of years. I mean, it's been everybody, right? Like Harper has hit really important home runs against them. Schwarber, Zach Wheeler, like he's performed exceptionally well against the Braves too. Like the Phillies just seem to get up for that franchise. But that's
a legitimately good rivalry too. Like
I know it is
like so high, such high baseball stakes, and then also feels like a genuine rivalry.
Like they don't like each other. Like they do not fuck with each other. Like the Arcia thing was one thing, but like just organizationally, it just doesn't seem like. And they do it in such different ways too. Like the Braves are like, we will Hoover vacuum all of your good young players, and then we will offer them a below market extension that for some reason they sign. And then Dombrowski's like, fuck it. Fuck it, we ball, like we'll sign all of the most obvious free agents, and the power of friendship will get us over the line, and John Middleton's pocketbooks. So, and his cigarette earnings, but that's okay. I don't know. That's my third and final up. Nick Castellanos torturing the Braves.
That was great. To put a bow then on all my stuff, I was watching baseball, Phillies, with my parents, for Sunday Night Baseball. It was this past weekend, Labor Day, because it's like hanging out with them up in Woodstock. Again, this is when you have a baby, you hang out with your parents on Labor Day weekend. And Nick Castellanos had a walk-off hit, and then they cut to I enjoy the Sunday Night Baseball broadcast. I think David Cohn is incredible, especially. Why do they not do the post-game interviews themselves? They have someone in studio for SportsCenter do the post-game interview. That person, no discredit to them, has probably not been watching this entire game because they were about to go on TV.
Yes.
They're probably getting ready. And so like Nick Castellanos gets a walk-off hit. I said, my parents were like, he's great. They previously had said he's like the worst person on the planet. Why can't he hit that pitch? Right. But like now he's great. And I was like, he's so like weird, actually. Like I like delightfully weird. Like I was like, he's like very dry, sense of humor, and like will be really thoughtful sometimes, but then other times, like if he thinks it's like a dumb question, like seriously shut it down, and then instantly delivered. Like I was like, oh, this is gonna be tough. I forgot he's gonna get interviewed by someone who like is not at the game and possibly didn't even watch the game. First question was like, what'd you see on that pitch? And he was like, fastball. And I was like, perfect. I like walked out of the room. I was like, say no more, Nick Castellanos. I don't need to see the rest of this interview. You just made me look like I know everything about baseball because I was able to deliver to my parents like a little nugget of insight that immediately paid off. So yeah.
He's been a favorite of the show since 2018 when he was on the Cubs, and they asked him about the trade deadline and what the team would feel like. Or actually, I don't think it was a trade deadline. I think it was like opening day. He was like, what does opening day mean to you? And Nick Castellanos was like, opening day is just any other day. And the reporter was kind of like, well, it's like it's a special day. Like things change, And he's like, why isn't every day opening day? If you tell yourself every day is opening day, then every day could be opening day. Like it's just, that's how he is. Like, it's just,
yes.
He's kind of like a Reddit post come to life sometimes.
Yes.
In good and bad ways. Hannah Kaiser, thank you so much. This was so much fun. 3 up, 3 down. I really appreciate you bringing all of the homework to the exercise and just having a really fun time. I will let you know what our listeners say about the protective gear.
Yes. Protective gear. Tell me about your favorite protective gear you've seen.
And I will pass that information along. But thank you so much for joining on the Patreon episode.
It was fun.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alex Rodriguez. Tipping pitches.
Tipping pitches.
This is the one that I love the most.
Tipping pitches.
So we'll see you next week. See ya!